The first stories that I learned about the creation of the earth and the world, I learned in Sunday school. I remembered hearing and learning actually two different stories from the book of Genesis. I didn't really put it together at the time that I was learning it, that they were two totally and separate different stories, but they were. I kind of learned them as a mix-mash. The first comes from the first chapter of Genesis, and there's a story, the creation story from the Christian tradition of how God first separated the light from the light, the waters from the water, and then God created the animals. And then God created man and woman at the very same time. And on the last day, God rested. Does that sound like a familiar story to you? In the second chapter of Genesis is a totally different account of how everything came to be. A totally different order of how things came. In this version, God first made man out of dust in a place called Eden. Then God made the trees and then the animals because man was lonely. Lastly, God made woman from man's rib. Totally two different stories of creation. When I went to college here at OCU, I studied religion and got to learn many other different creation myths from many different cultures all over the world throughout time and history. And I learned that every single culture has had their very own creation story that they believe about how things came to be. I started to be able to learn that I took the Bible too seriously in order to take it literally. In graduate school, I studied spirituality. And usually when one studies spirituality or religion, you learn from people who have names designated as theologian. Theo meaning divine, and logian, the person who studies. But here at this school, I learned from geologians. You might know that geology is the study of the earth. And so I learned from people who paired the study of the earth with the study of divine things. I learned from mathematical cosmologists who study the origin of the universe. I learned from ecological teachers who were also poets. It was an amazing way to learn about the creation story. About this time, it was 2003, I was in graduate school in the Bay Area of California, and there was a craze going around about slam poetry. Have you ever heard of slam poetry? Some of you are familiar with it? Well, I was in Berkeley, one of the epicenters of slam poetry, and I would go to this bar called the Starry Plow every Wednesday night, and I would hear slam poets get up on the stage every Wednesday night and speak with such passion, and I was totally inspired by that. And I thought to myself, one day I want to write a slam poem. So just put that on the side for right now. Some people want to believe that science and spirituality and religion are diametrically opposed, but I had one of the most profound spiritual experiences of my life when I was in a classroom in graduate school learning from scientists. I learned about the grandeur of God's creation. For this particular class, we were to read this book called The Universe Story by Brian Swim and Thomas Berry, one a scientist and one a geologian. And what had happened was that scientists had been telling us the data and the facts about evolution and what we were learning through observation and knowledge and research, but it had never before been put in a story format. And this book compiled all that we knew to that moment and told it in a story format, just like Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and so many other creation stories from other cultures. I was riveted by the story. I thought it was amazing. I wanted to know a particular question after I read the book. It seemed like a holy story. And I wanted to know where in the universe, this Big Bang that I had learned about, where exactly did that happen? Where did it first take place? So I asked my question to the cosmologist, and I said, where did this happen? And he explained it to me using the metaphor of dough with raisins. It's going to become raisin bread. He said, imagine you have a little piece of dough, and that dough is representing all time and space. And it's full of raisins, which are representing the galaxies. As this little piece of dough with raisins begins to bake and expand and heat and become bread, every raisin within the dough is moving away from every other raisin as it rises, just as the galaxies moved away from each other as they expanded. And so this cosmologist told me to answer your question about where it all began, what you need to do is to reverse this process. Just imagine that dough going back on itself and all the raisins coming back together. And so every little space and place in the universe all used to be touching each other. And so literally, we can say that the very place where you are resting your feet in this moment was the origin of where the Big Bang happened. I picked up my feet off the floor. It was an amazing revelation to me. I felt like it was I was standing on holy ground. I'd read about people in the Bible who had been visited by an angel and they could no longer speak for a time. I couldn't speak. I left the classroom. We had a little meditation center at this school, and I went in there and I just was reeling from this amazing story that I felt like I had just somewhat grasped. The class took a break for lunch, and my friends came and grabbed me, and most people were going to a Vietnamese restaurant, and they noticed that I wasn't speaking. I really felt like I might never speak ever again because I didn't have anything that could touch the amazingness of what I had just experienced. I pointed to something on the menu, and the waiter came by, and my friend said, "Well, we don't know why she's not talking, but we think she wants to order that, so why don't you bring her that kind of food?" Of course, I did speak again, obviously. But the experience I had was one of grasping a creation story that I saw could be embraced by all people of all cultures, one that we could share in common. It was also a creation story that did not lose its power when I took it literally. I thought everyone needs to be able to understand this story, but I don't think that everybody would read a book. And so I wondered if I might be able to take the information from this amazing story, the information that included the names of the first multicellular organisms that were our ancestors, the names of the galaxies that came before our galaxy and created ours, and to put all this timeline and these important names, just like Adam and Eve in our story of creation, to encapsulate it in a slam poem. I took the book and pencil and paper and a lawn chair, and I walked into the Oakland Hills, the woods, the redwoods in Oakland, and I sat down and I had one of the second most amazing spiritual experiences of my life when I was given a slam poem from God in my experience. I think about our contemporary first reading for today, that story of the loons speaking to us from 200 years in the future. And I feel like we have to have this experience of awe and reverence for our creation and for the future generations. And as our scripture from Galatians said, we reap what we sow. And so if we sow awe and reverence, and if we never grow tired of doing good for our environment, then the future generations will reap the harvest of a beautiful and nourishing planet Earth. So here is the origin story of our universe. Wanted. Knowledge so powerful, wisdom so wise, a story about myself that would allow me to devise a tree of where I came from and a deeper sense of self and a clue to where I'm heading and a boundless bank of wealth. 13.7 billion years ago, but really before then, in an instant, without time, without space, without light, without atoms, without particles, without laws, without light, the originating power of the universe was. It wasn't a flash and a flare and a drop. It was in the beginning, and it has not stopped, flooding forth from her thighs, enter time, enter space, The first moments of existence, she sees beauty, she sees grace, expansion, her only roadmap. Freedom and randomness, her only thoughts. Electrons, quarks, positrons, and neutrinos had yet to settle down in their permanent parking spots. Matter begins to meet and greet. Well, what do you know? Relationships form, patterns are set. Theoretical laws serve as an alphabet for what do you want to say? What word are you trying to spell? Because if it's atom, a few protons and neutrons fit grammatically well. Building blocks and foundational keys emerge from the billowing blast. Self-organizing helium and hydrogen set to unlock vast galaxies fast, sweeping energy and matter to the center of its core. Galaxies invented ladders leading down to the floor of black holes, whose immense masses, revolutions, dense waves that shocked clouds, helium and hydrogen condensed rapidly into thousands of wows that we call stars. 10.4 billion years later, Tiamat, a bright star, says goodbye to her body, supernova, quasar. Up from the remnants her grandchildren rise, pinwheeling galaxies alight the night skies. One child's name is Pegasus, another Fornax, Coma, Hercules. Dawning bright futures and potentials are Sculptor, Maganelic, and M33. A special grandchild known as Virgo Cluster has 24 galaxies in sight. On one end, a pole named Andromeda. On another, and a little to the right, 28,000 light years from the galactic center, rests Milky Way. After 100 million years, housing 100 billion stars, our sun is born in glory within this candy bar. 50 million calendars. Solar winds spin round the sun. 20 billion tons of protons a day light up a solar system just begun. Some residue gas. 1/100th and fraction, a pie crumb fallen off the plate miraculously cools into 9 round balls. Funny what time can do if we just wait. Mercury and Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. Third from the sun, familiarity, Earth, the elements having to come together just so, including proper size and position with due respect to sun, enabling gravitation and electromagnetic balance. And what about life? It's just begun. Million-year planet-wide lightning storms, stinging the ocean's expanse, produced Aries, the first living cell, our ancestor who memorized the dance of creation. Performing aboriginal magic, swallowing a single drop of seawater, these prokaryotes, Aries descendants, spit out replications of themselves, sons and daughters. Mutation, special blessing from within, allowed Prometheo, our next indigenous hero, to fashion a photon food-capturing device, photosynthesis, the energy we need to go forward 1.9 billion birthdays. Crisis was at hand and life was dying fast because oxygen had set fire to our relatives until mutation brings Prospero. At last, this respirating cell thrived with oxygen. Curse, now blessing once again. Concentrations of 21% stabilized our atmosphere into fortune. Introducing celebrities, all mutations from the norm. The first symbiotic relationship, Viking and Ingla patent the form. Kronos first eats living beings, predator-prey populations take flight. Sappho discovers sexual reproduction and community her children find delight because now they begin to associate in mass and build a common wall. The first multicellular organism, Argos, has found its call as the match that lit the fire, as the punch that won the fight. Soon, flatworms and jellyfish emerge geologically overnight. From here, the tale spins faster and faster. Snails, clams, jawed fish, insects, trees leave water, reptiles lay eggs, flowers bloom under Tyrannosaurus rex, self-consciousness evolves, Homo sapiens are all the rage, grandmother creates her next cave drawing while her daughter slams poems up on stage. I'm asking 6th grade science. I remember how and when, but one more hand I wave in question. Just where did all of this begin? Picture this, cosmologists tell me. You're standing on Earth looking out. You spot 2 stars in different directions. All you need is to calculate their route. The closest moved so many miles per hour, traveling directly away from you. The second star, twice as far, travels twice as fast. A clue. Reverse the motion, rewind the tape. Both end up here at the same time. Hold up, wait, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to say? That the universe started here? That is incredibly wild. No way. I know now what I wanted because I can feel now where I am from, and I can look around at all of you and know that we are one. May it be so.